Hey everybody, welcome to my new channel. I am so excited. This has been a long time in the making. I had a channel on a previous page and I had craziness go on in my life, and I am actually kind of happy because I decided to change directions a little bit in where I was previously going. But this channel is called Criminal Perpetrators, and the first series on this channel is going to be called Perpetrators in the Prairie State. The Prairie State being my home state of Illinois. So everybody that I'm going to talk about in this initial series is going to be either from Illinois or committed the majority of their crimes in Illinois. So hence the name Perpetrators in the Prairie State. And my first video, I'm very excited, is going to be on America's first documented serial killer, H.H. Holmes. Now, this is going to be a multi-part video because I don't want my first video to be like 2.5 hours long. So this video, I'm going to really split up into about 3 or 4 parts, depending on exactly, how long the script is going to be. But in this first part, I thought that I would actually talk about something that I don't think is covered on most videos about H.H. Holmes, and it's kind of a crazy theory. So the reason that I'm covering this first is because I want this to be fresh in everybody's minds when we go back and talk about like the beginning of H.H. Holmes' life, his family history, and then of course everything that happened in Chicago, in the murder castle, the most, famous part of his story. I want everybody to be kind of thinking about this in their heads. Now, there is a theory that H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper, the famous serial killer from England, are the same person. Now, a lot of ripperologists or people that are like very schooled in Jack the Ripper history and theory do not agree with that. But there is a gentleman out there, and a bunch of people actually, who think that it's quite possible that H.H. Holmes, America's first documented serial killer, is also Jack the Ripper. So we're going to get into this. I'm going to explain everything, but first it's important to remember that H.H. Holmes was a con artist, a bigamist. He was first and foremost a scammer. He was a complete sociopath, and he had really like no conscience whatsoever to speak of. And he was a murderer. Now, how many people did Holmes really kill? We're going to get into that in, the later parts of this first initial video series on H.H. Holmes. But we're probably never going to know the truth. He is the first documented serial killer, notorious, and there's so many stories about him. But to be honest, the crazy numbers that people are, say that he possibly killed, we don't even know if that's really true. We don't even know if it's close to that. So, and we also don't know if he is the most notorious and famous serial killer that London has ever known. But Jeff Mudgett, who is H.H. Holmes' great-grandson from his first wife, Clara. Remember I said Holmes was a bigamist. He was married multiple times, but legally he was married to Clara. And Jeff Mudgett believes that H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper are in fact the same person. In 2006, Scotland Yard and the BBC created a composite photo based on the old eyewitness accounts all the way back from 1888, when Jack the Ripper was killing women in his time. And they took that composite photo of Jack the Ripper and a picture of Holmes, and they took it to retired investigators who strongly believed that there is a resemblance between the two of them based on those eyewitness accounts and based on real life pictures that we have of H.H. Holmes. So Also, there is this famous letter that was believed to be sent to the Central News Agency of London on September 27th, 1888, and possibly written by Jack the Ripper, that was dubbed the Dear Boss letter. Now, this letter is controversial. It was forwarded to Scotland Yard on September 29th of 1888. And in the letter, the killer actually said that his next victim, he was going to cut the ears off of the victim. The next day, on September 30th, the body of Catherine Eddowes was found. The letter was not published by the papers, any of the media, until after her body was found. And this poor woman, suffered from terrible facial mutilation. She had a large slash going all the way from her eyelid down her face and then to her nose, and her nose was nearly severed. Her throat was slashed. Her right ear had been cut through and, nearly taken off. And the Dear Boss letter was examined by an expert by the British Library. And it's crazy because they actually compared it to confirmed samples of H.H. Holmes' writings. So these are writings that we know for sure are H.H. Holmes. They compared the writing sample from the Dear Boss letter and confirmed H.H. Holmes' writing samples. And crazily enough, the writing samples had a 97.95% match, which is actually very high. So I'm going to read you the Dear Boss letter, and then I'm going to explain a little bit about it, because the Dear Boss letter is an important piece of evidence, but we also don't know if it was really a red herring. So it's kind of crazy. So let me read what it says. So it says, Dear Boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they will not fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about leather apron gave me real fits. I am down on the whores, and me shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear from me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears. Already this is crazy. And send the police officers just for jolly. Wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work. Then I will give it straight out. My knife's so nice and sharp. I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. P.S. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands. Curse it. No luck yet. They say I am a doctor now. Ha ha. So that letter, well, first of all, the letter itself is filled with ridiculous amounts of grammatical errors. It doesn't flow that well. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it was like almost on purpose written, in my opinion, to make the person writing it seem like he's crazy. But it was like, I don't know, very contrived. Like, it doesn't seem real. Like the person isn't that crazy. So crazy, but the Ripper murders themselves were isolated to an area known as Whitechapel. In this particular area of London, was very poor. There were 76,000 people crammed into less than a square mile. So like this tiny little bit of space in London. Most of the people were immigrants. This was like after the Irish potato famine. Like there were so many, like thousands of people there. There was not really a lot of honest jobs for men to come by, let alone women. So a lot of women turned to prostitution just to simply like feed themselves and, you know, in some cases feed their children. So it was very dirty, it was congested, it was almost the perfect place for a killer to blend in. And it just so happened that at this time, a very good friend of Holmes from his days when he was in Michigan studying to be a medical student, because that's one of the things that he did, was go to school to be a doctor. Don't forget that about Holmes. But one of his good friends that he ran scams with in Michigan, Edmund Buckley, actually lived in the Whitechapel area. And Buckley was in on so many swindles with Holmes. They actually sold corpses to medical facilities. And according to old census records that were found, Holmes at some point showed that he had residency as well in the Whitechapel area. So there's also written documentation of a complaint filed against him for trying to sell a corpse to the Whitechapel Hospital. So at some point he had to be there, or at least somebody using his name was there. So that's crazy. So this complaint, though, was made at the same time as the Ripper murders. So was he there? So there's 5 victims that are known to the Jack the Ripper killings, and they're called the Canonical 5. They were all killed between August 31st and November 9th of 1888. So we're talking like a very short period of time. It was not a lot of time that these people were killed. And Holmes purchased the murder castle in Chicago in the spring of 1889. But he actually didn't start he purchased it in July of 1888, but he didn't start the construction until the spring of 1889. So, you know, you're going from July all the way until the spring in Chicago. So what was he doing? Because the crazy part is that Holmes was like, it's not like he tried to hide himself very well. He was extremely sloppy when it came to paperwork, but there's no record of him in Chicago that whole winter. There's no record. Like there's no like, oh, he was buying this or doing this or running this scam. Nobody really knows where he was. So it's kind of crazy because it's like, was he there? Where was he? Was he maybe in London? Maybe killing people? So Annie Chapman was one of the Ripper victims, and the police doctor, like the surgeon that worked for the police, kind of like doing investigations, believed that Annie in particular was murdered because the person was trying to cut out her womb. And he said that it was like so strategic and so well done that the person would have had to have had some kind of knowledge of anatomy. And remember, I just said that H.H. Holmes was a med student back in Michigan. So Jeff Mudgett, his great-great-grandson, he's got this theory. So he believes that Holmes's real intentions were to distract the police and the media. He didn't really care about murdering these prostitutes. The whole thing was a distraction because according to Jeff Mudgett, in H.H. Holmes' journals, it says that he was trying to create some kind of like life elixir, some kind of youth serum to keep him young and alive longer. So what his plan was to kidnap and murder wealthy women and use their body parts to create this like youth serum. And he didn't want to draw any attention to like the wealthy women that he was trying to rob and murder. So he, did this gruesome murder spree of these prostitutes in Whitechapel. So also Jeff Mudgett dug up records, and the name H. Holmes actually appears traveling on a ship from London back to the United States after the last Ripper murder was complete. So what does that mean? So he was gone for the whole winter. Nobody knows where he was. Again, sloppy with paperwork. Then H. Holmes, which, Holmes, not the most uncommon name, but not, like super common. And then, really like what a coincidence, but coming back like right after the last Ripper murder. And then he comes to Chicago and does everything that he does there. So there's a lot of people that are like, no, this is circumstantial, right? Which really it is. I mean, it's all circumstantial evidence. There's nothing like completely concrete, I wouldn't say. But the Dear Boss letter too has come into question by a lot of like Ripper experts. And some people even think that the newspapers themselves actually wrote the letter because they were trying to like sell papers, like they were trying to bring more attention, and that it wasn't really about like, no, Jack the Ripper didn't really write this letter. Like that's what they really think. So, and then the other thing is that H.H. Holmes was mainly about greed. I would say that his driving force in everything was greed and money. Anybody that he killed almost seemed to be like an unavoidable consequence of his main objective. And he was like an egotistical con artist who was really just trying to find any scam that he could to get money. He scammed insurance companies, he scammed medical schools, he sold corpses, he, was a bigamist who, got money out of the women that he married. I mean, he was definitely scammer. First and foremost, a scammer. And I really think that the majority of the murders that Holmes is, connected to that we really know of, it seems almost like I said, it was like an unavoidable consequence. Like he had to kill these people so that he could just like do what he wanted to do. The Ripper murders, though, they're odd because they seem to be done by somebody who genuinely wanted to kill, They're very horrific. These women were cut up. He would strangle the victims before he killed them. And it seemed methodical, but at the same time, it was also messy, right? So that kind of lends to the theory that it was all a distraction because, here this guy's killing prostitutes while police are on the street and leaving their bodies like in staircases and, in the street. And it's not like he made any effort really to hide these victims, Jack the Ripper. So I don't know. It's tricky. But the thing is that nobody knows what happened. After the last victim, Jack the Ripper just stopped killing out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. As fast as he started killing, he was gone. Never to be heard from again. And if you believe Jeff Mudgett, he says that his great-great-grandfather reveals shocking evidence in his journals. But this is the other thing, is that he's never published the journals. Now, he says that, he wants to keep the journals safe and private because in case the police or Scotland Yard ever does need these journals to do an investigation, he doesn't want anything to happen to them, and he doesn't want the majority of the journals to be leaked to the public. So me, the way that I feel about it, I'm like, you know what? Forensics every single day is making big like jumps in technology. I mean, we can find murders from, familial DNA, we can, like it's crazy the stuff that we can do now. And the Ripper murders were actually, because, it was mostly all done by Scotland Yard, they were investigated very well. And there's like, you know, they knew that he had used a knife. There's, you know, lots of evidence of what the actual like wounds looked like. There's tons and tons of paperwork on the Ripper murders. And we know for sure that Holmes did kill some people. And there's a theory that if we could possibly examine the knife bone marks on the Ripper victims, right? Because like it, obviously the bone is still going to be there. If we could examine those bone marks on the Ripper victims and compare them to some of the bodies of the victims that we have from H.H. Holmes, would we possibly, over a century later, be able to find a match, a murder weapon match? Now, wouldn't that be amazing? Now, of course, most DNA is going to be completely, you know, degraded by now. I mean, we're talking like 100 years old. But wouldn't it be crazy if we could actually compare the knife markings on the bones in the Holmes cases and the Ripper cases and see if there is a match? And all of those coincidences that Jeff Mudgett has brought forth, you know, where was Holmes during the winter of 1888? Where was he? Why was his name on a ship manifest coming back from London right after the Ripper murder stopped? Why did the Ripper murder stop? They just stopped out of nowhere. Then there's that match. There's 97.95% match done by experts, you know, that say, hey, this handwriting is really close, you know. And again, I think that that letter was written that way on purpose. So maybe he tried to change his handwriting a little bit too on purpose. You know, maybe if that letter wasn't so like contrived and obviously purposefully written the way that it was, maybe it would even be a better match. Maybe it would be a 99% match. I mean, 97.95% though is really close. Then there's the composite sketch. You know, experts have said like they think that that's the same person. So I want you guys to keep all of this in mind when we go through in the next video the early life of H.H. Holmes, because we're going to discuss that. One of the things that's always fascinated me about serial killers the most is how did they get that way? You know, like what happens to these people that makes them turn to these horrible crimes? You know, like you've got people, you know, like, you know, John Wayne Gacy, who was abused mentally and physically by his father. You've got people like, you know, like Jeffrey Dahmer, who you're like, but why? I mean, the signs were there when he was young that he could potentially wind up being a serial killer. And like, yes, his parents' marriage was split, but like his parents were essentially very normal. You know, so it's like, what happens? Is this nature? Is this nurture? Is it just their brains are wired that way anyways? What happens to turn a person into a serial killer? So we're going to go over H.H. Holmes' beginning life. We're going to talk about everything that he did before he came to Chicago. And then we're going to, you know, get into another part where we discuss the murder castle, the construction of the murder castle. The whole construction of the murder castle is a crazy story because he was such a scammer the whole time. Like when I tell you all the stuff this crazy man did, he was such a scammer. And then after what happened to the murder castle, he left, the scams and the things that he did, how he got caught, his prison confessions, and of course his execution. Then we're going to get into a creepier, super weird part of the story that I also don't hear covered a lot of places, and that's the fact that some people think that H.H. Holmes had the evil eye and that he cursed anybody that was involved in his trial and execution. Crazy. So we're going to get into all of that in the videos to come. Please like, subscribe, turn your notification bells on, comment below. Tell me what you think of my first video on this channel. I had a previous channel. I had 3 videos on there, which I'm going to redo eventually for this channel. And this has been a long time coming, and this is my true passion in life. I'm obsessed with true crime, and I'm very, very, very excited to share this first video with you guys, and I cannot wait to hear what you think. So please let me know in the comments. Tell me if there's anybody that you want me to talk about. Now, I do have this whole first series, Perpetrators in the Prairie State, pretty much set up, and this is all going to be, probably the most famous serial killers that either lived in or, did most of their crime in Illinois. So that's going to be the first series. But if you have anybody else you want me to talk about, please say something in the comments. I'm so excited to hear everybody's feedback, what you thought about this video. If you've heard about the Jack the Ripper, H.H. Holmes connection before, and I can't wait to film my next video. And I'm so excited that this is finally, getting going and started. So, and then you guys got to let me know too, what you think about my backgrounds, what you think about my buddies back here, Mr. Owl and and my raven. You guys tell me what you think about my whole aesthetic, and if you guys like it, or if you guys are like, ugh, that's crazy, like, what are you doing? So let me know, and I'm really excited, and I will see you guys next week. Okay, bye.